Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to each and every one of you who have dialed in from all over the globe. My name is Deepak Mahapatra, Senior Officer, Business and Market Development at the Alliance for Rural Electrification. And I have the honor to invite you or to welcome you even to this coolest webinar ever on the topic of sustainable DRE interventions in cooling solutions for food and health best practices. Next slide, please. So the setup of the webinar has been put together in such a setup. First, we will start with the opening remarks, which I'm doing it at the moment, standing in for our CEO, Mr. David Lecoq, who could not join us for some other important engagement. Thereafter, I will be moderating the whole session throughout. We will have the first keynote address from Ms. Ruth Kimani, Senior Associate Clean Energy Access CLASP. Thereafter, we will go into the speaker interventions, where we will have four different entities presenting their solutions, their concepts, as well as their product and services in the spectrum of cooling, both for food as well as health sector. Thereafter, we will enter into a moderated panel discussion session, whereby we will taking the questions from the audience as well. And speaking of that, I have the pleasure to invite the audience to please make use of the question and answer feature on this GoToWebinar platform with which you have dialed in to ask your question. And please make sure that you are also referring to the speaker who you are asking your question to, so that it's easier for me to then send it, delegate the question to the speaker. So once we have had the moderator discussion as well as the audience Q&A, we will go into the closing remarks done by my colleague, Ms. Dorothy Altremba, Senior Advisor, GIZ. Next slide, please. Okay, before we go into the topic, I have the pleasure to also quickly introduce you to the ARE. The Alliance for Rural Electrification is an international and independent business association working in the sector of decentralized renewable energy. And what we do is catalyze private sector-driven markets for sustainable electricity services. In doing so, create income generation opportunities and power equitable green economies. As we are speaking today, I have the pleasure to also inform you that we are the #1 global decentralized renewable energy association, which is currently federating more than 200 members, private sector companies from all across the globe, having represented from more than 55 countries, over 3 major continents where energy access is an imminent issue. Next one, please. What I was talking about in my previous slide is depicted over here. As you can see on this world map, the 3 major continents where we are predominantly active, Africa being the continent where more than 600 million people are still lacking access to electricity, which also makes it one of our dominant playing fields. As an association, ARE is one of the unique entities which is focusing on all kinds of technologies that are available within the renewable energy value chain. Then thereafter, in terms of systems, we are focusing on as small as standalone systems ranging to nanogrids, picogrids, minigrids, macrogrids, and beyond as well. Next one, please. In terms of our membership services, we have 4 different pillars, and I will quickly walk you through them. That is business and market development, capacity building, policy and advocacy, and communications and marketing support. So those of you who have dialed in and are willing to or wishing to also get benefited from the services of ARE, please make sure to reach out to us, and we will be happy to have a call and talk about how we can help. Next one, please. Okay, coming to the PWCET series, the Paving the Way for Clean Energy Transition series. Now, this series started in 2020 Christmas time when myself, when ARE and the Grüneberger Energie program of GIZ, we had a discussion together to conceptualize a 10 different webinar series, whereby we will be touching upon very important and pressing topics which are related to the clean and which are contributing to the clean energy transition, to start a public discourse on the subject. And we have reached to the 9th edition of this PWCET series, And today we will be focusing on sustainable cooling solutions powered by decentralized renewable energy systems to address the cold chain related challenges as well as opportunities, particularly in the food and health sectors in Africa. Well, the session will also be followed by the moderated discussion and audience Q&A as spoken already. Next slide, please. Well, this is yours truly, the moderator of the session. I have already introduced myself, so without further ado, I will request for the next slide. And then invite my colleague, Ms. Ruth Kimani, Senior Associate, Clean Energy Access from CLASP, to do the keynote address. Ruth, can you kindly turn your camera on? And you've got 10 minutes to do the keynote intervention. The floor is all yours, and thank you so much for coming on board.
Yeah, thank you so much, Deepak, and great to be here and to be participating in this very important conversation around the, as we reflect on the importance of sustainable DRE solutions, particularly for cooling in food and health centers, especially for communities who are in environments where they are within energy constrained environments. So as you've heard, my name is Ruth Kimani. I work for CLASP as a senior associate. So at CLASP, we are a non-profit organization, and our work focuses on improving energy efficiency of appliances and equipment. And we leverage this to increase access to clean energy, as well as mitigate and adapt to climate change. So as part of CLASP and through the Efficiency for Access Coalition. So this is a global coalition that seeks to promote high-performing energy appliances to enable access to clean energy to the world's poorest people. I've basically been involved in the implementation of the Global Leap Off-Grid Cold Chain Challenge, which is a global competition that seeks to identify energy efficient technologies aimed appropriate for use in energy constrained settings, particularly for agriculture in communities, in the global south for mostly. And then in addition to that, have been involved as well in coordinating the market research for cooling technologies, particularly in 3 markets, and that's Nigeria, Kenya, and India. And so in my presentation today, as we speak about cooling and DRE cooling interventions, part of my presentation will involve insights informed by this work that we have done in terms of what we see through the lens of technology, the commercial markets, as well as the financing and sort of like the engagement with the public sector when we talk about this kind of solutions. And so we'll also touch on some of the barriers that we have seen, and also put forward some of the proposed interventions that might be useful for the sector as a whole to consider. And so with that, the importance of cooling, I think there's no doubt that cooling is really important, and particularly in the face of a warming globe where we are seeing rapid population growth and urbanization, and particularly in emerging economies. And definitely cooling technologies do play or will play a critical role in terms of facilitating access to the cooling services. And so the cooling technologies basically do have really, really high potential in terms of improving livelihoods for farmers by improving, productivity of agricultural farms, which overall goes towards enhancing food and income security. They also do play an important component in terms of stimulating productive use activities, which of course as well goes towards generating incomes for families, as well as alleviating poverty. And in terms of health, it also plays a critical role in terms of making sure that health services needed by communities and populations of people who who currently lack them, such as immunization, is available for people. So in that sense, it is important that all efforts are done towards promoting and scaling basically the interventions for cooling, particularly in energy constrained settings. Next slide, please. Now, the opportunity for cooling and the need for cooling is really, really massive, as illustrated on this slide. So these statistics are largely, borrowed from the report that Sustainable Energy for All put out, the chilling prospects tracking sustainable cooling for all in 2020. And as you can see, over 840 million people currently are living without access to electricity, and by extension as well, without access to electric appliances that boost productivity. And so this is a very big market opportunity that exists, and need that exists that the cooling can serve to fill the gap. Over 13% of all food production is lost worldwide, and this is due to lack of cooling technology, with particularly for sub-Saharan Africa, 40 or 50% of all the food that is lost, it happens before it even reaches the consumer who need it. The estimated cost of all the global food loss and waste annually is at $1 trillion. So this is significant amount of money. And then it's estimated that currently that the food that's lost due to broken cold chains could feed up to 950 million. And then in looking at health sector, so up to 90% of health facilities do not have access to reliable cold chain equipment, including 20% without any cold chain equipment at all. And this is also statistics from the SC4O report. And so all of this basically goes to show that there's a lot that needs to be done to ramp up efforts towards delivering DRE cooling solutions in both of these sectors, as the opportunity for positive impact is massive, both economically, socially, and environmentally. Next slide, please. So in reference to the interventions I mentioned above, which we have implemented through the Efficiency for Access Coalition. Next slide, please. Yeah, so through the work we have done implementing the Global Livelihood Cold Chain Challenge and the market research we've done in parts of for cooling for cold chains in Kenya and Nigeria and India. Basically, what we have seen in terms of technology is that generally the off-grid cooling market remains really in its infancy. But in terms of technology, we are seeing small but growing innovative technologies that are essentially adaptable and usable across different market segments. So this means that even for communities that are completely off-grid, or those that have, have access to grid but may be unreliable, so we are seeing that there's a gradual increase in terms of like the innovative technologies being developed to service this kind of market segments, and so that's overall good. However, we did note as from the implementation of the OGCC that in terms of the technical performance, that remains highly variable, and so there's really opportunity there to continue innovating and developing technologies to improve, their performance, as well as in terms of like cost efficiency, and that helps to enhance their affordability. And then from the SC4O report, basically looking at the medical sector as well, or the health sector, only 10% of the power capacity of a conventional vaccine refrigerator is required to operate super efficient refrigerators. And so basically this shows that there's opportunity for cooling technologies designed for weak and off-grid sectors, basically to to be beneficial and create massive impact also as well when utilized in health settings. Next slide. And then in terms of the market, so as I mentioned, the commercial markets for off-grid cooling solutions remains in its infancies, but but overall, in terms of what companies have been able to do, or sort of like the overview of the market situation is that we are seeing that there are emergent business models that are aimed towards increasing access for these cooling services in communities that may not be able to afford these solutions by buying the technologies outright, such as the cooling as a service. And then in terms of as well optimizing on the reach and trying to balance between business approaches so that companies are able to deploy this technology. So we are seeing them using or employing a mix and a combination of different business approaches. And then in terms of the looking at the supply of these cooling technologies, a lot of them basically currently have to be exported, especially in markets such as sub-Saharan Africa. And so that basically points that there is really a need for, looking into how to promote local manufacturing. And even in cases where we have local assembly outfits, still from the key parts or the key components, the key cooling components and power components needed for this kind of technologies would need to be important to be imported into the countries. And so so they still and that has implications in terms of the overall affordability. And then in terms of viable, financially viable supply chains, for a lot of the cooling technologies that we are seeing currently being deployed, especially in energy constrained settings, the export markets and other high-end retail markets presently offer the only viable supply chains. And so there's a lot of thinking that needs to go into how do we stir up and stimulate, local value chains as well, where the most need is also needed. So so these are basically sort of like, some of the observations we have done based on the work that we have been doing within this space. And so overall, to point that there's still a lot that needs to do to basically build this market towards maturity at a place where, we can support more deployment of DRE cooling solutions that are sustainable and scalable. Next slide, please. And then in terms of financing, what we have observed and seen is that there's limited financing. There's not enough financing, or there's limited financing that's accessible for companies to be able to provide consumer financing, which is critical to extend to customers. And generally, there's not a lot of support from the government as well in terms of like subsidy to extend these services, and particularly for our countries in emerging economies. Next slide. And then in terms of the public sector, what we have observed, there is generally weak linkages that exist between the cold chain actors as well and the public and government institutions, and therefore this limits the the communication and other collaborative actions that would be needed. And as well in terms of like the policies and the standards, regulations needed to offer guidance towards developing some of these solutions, as well as to overall just create an enabling environment that supports deployment of DRE solutions. So those don't exist currently, or where they exist, they are very few, and a lot of who are not aware. So another area of opportunity that we need to look into. If we could go to the intervention slide as I wrap up. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and so as I wrap up and sort of like drawing back to the observations and the insights we've drawn as described in terms of technology, commercial markets, financing, and public sector, and understanding the current layout, we have outlined some of the interventions that we think that it would be important for consideration for the sector moving forward, to be able to, as I mentioned, to bring the market towards a self-sustaining and scalable level. And so towards the technology, basically there needs to be a better understanding of the customer value chain fit to the technology. There's need to invest into enhancing training and certification to increase the local technical capacity that's needed to maintain this kind of solutions. And then in terms of the market, it will be really important to look into how do we activate use of this kind of solutions to grow local markets and local value chains where a lot of need is really felt. And then as well, work together with farmer groups and existing cooperatives as we identify how best, or how do we best develop business models that can reach these kind of communities that have limited resources. And in terms of financing, it will really be useful to consider how we can better incentivize or design financing mechanisms that better support companies as well as consumers that targeted for this kind of solutions, and overall encourage more engagement with the public sector so that the relevant policies that are needed to stimulate activity and create an enabling environment for this kind of solutions is developed. And so with that, I'll end my presentation. Yeah, and thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ruth, for setting the scene and bringing many nuances of the cooling spectrum to our audiences, starting with technology, how to finance, and what are the roles that public sector could play, as well as how the private sector with farmers cooperatives and then other NGOs can also come together to raise a voice and then intervene more in the spectrum to form more enabling environment for implementation of cooling technologies. Thanks a lot for this very informational intervention. So dear audience, now we have the pleasure to go into the speaker interventions. Please note that the session is being recorded and the PowerPoint slides, including the recording, will be shared with you on the website of ARE as well as GBE. So please make sure that you are paying enough attention to all the interventions. Be ready with your questions, and please ask the questions by referring to the name of the speaker that you want to ask the questions to. So without further ado, may I have the pleasure to invite Ms. Nora Magiro to start her intervention. Nora, you have 10 minutes, and I encourage you to please stick to the time. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Deepa. And thank you so much, Ari, for hosting me for this session. It's quite an exciting one, and pretty much I agree with you, the coolest session ever. So my name is Nora Magero. I am one of the founders for Drop Access, and we always pride ourselves in the slogan that we're bridging the cold chain gaps in off-grid communities, not just in Africa, but hopefully even anywhere in the world. So next slide, please. And most of us actually know the problem that have been outlined here on this slide. And the way we look at it is the overall problem that is affecting the lack of cold chain, that also trickles down to lack of electricity, lack of utilities and technologies that are also appropriate, that all pretty much contribute to the lack of cold chain. And we find that 1.9 billion people are at risk. And these are poor populations because they actually lack access to sustainable cooling. And the effect of this is the way you look at it is twofold. There's the healthcare effect, then there's the food effect. So if you look at the healthcare sector that we've also worked in, is that there's vaccine loss that occurs due to cold chain inaccessibility, not just vaccine loss, but also drug loss, unavailability of blood for transfusion and the likes. Basically, healthcare is at risk. And the risks are quite evident in places like Africa, where children still die from vaccine preventable diseases. We're still having people who can't get even a tetanus shot or even an anti-rabies shot or antivenom just because there is no appropriate cooling And also, well, the COVID crisis is quite evident why there is their need to provide appropriate cooling within the healthcare space. The other side is the food situation and food security that we still is uncertain because of lack of access to cooling, and there's so much food waste that occurs each and every single day, and this is affecting smallholder farmers and is affecting economies, and it's just affecting access to food at the table for each and every single person. Next slide, please. Now, what we do to tackle these solutions right here in Kenya and pretty much trickling to the rest of Africa is that we're manufacturers and distributors of solar refrigeration. So we have locally made solar refrigerators here in Kenya that are used within the cold chain in the healthcare industry. We also promote the use of portable solar refrigeration because we know how much it's important to increase the geographical reach for cold chain in areas where uh, uh, geography is actually quite a challenge and terrain is a problem. We promote use of IoT to improve remote monitoring and also after-sales support for these cold chain technologies. Our technologies are solar powered, just to ensure that no matter what is happening, the energy access issue won't be a challenge. And our solution is quite plug and play. As an engineer in this space, I've seen how the fact that some technologies are not accessible or easy to use is affecting their adoption and their uptake in the market. Hence, we ensure that the product that we are bringing out to the market are quite plug and play. And there's the issue of affordability. Culture is still quite affordable. Look at the healthcare space in Kenya, where to get a solar refrigerator is upwards of 3,500 USD. For a rural community, a rural healthcare clinic that is level 2 and below, that's pretty much the entire cost of the facility. So it's quite unaffordable for them to get this coaching. Next slide, please. Excuse me, I have a cold. One of the products that we're offering here in Kenya is called the VaxiBox. The VaxiBox is a portable IoT-enabled solar refrigerators that is portable enough to be mounted on the motorbike, the bicycle, to be wheeled around, to be carted, just to improve the geographical reach. It's also solar powered to ensure that it's always running in real time, even as it's the bicycle, it has the battery backup that ensures the fridge is actually operating to keeping the vaccines in the best temperature as much as possible. So VaxiBox is also IoT monitored because we know it's not just enough to keep vaccines cold or even drugs cold. It's also equally important to ensure that we're able to build traceability and also ensure that monitoring standards have been put in place so that vaccines never go wrong, never go bad. And if they go bad, we're able to trace back and see what actually went wrong. Is it the battery? Is it the door was open for too long? And these kind of structures have been able are helping to build traceability within the healthcare sector and helping governments like the government of Kenya to appropriately plan for the healthcare programs. So the vaccine box goes for 2,000 USD, which is pretty much affordable compared to the 3,500 USD refrigerators for the healthcare sector. Next slide, please. So far, Drop Access has been able to manufacture quite a number of refrigerators. We are on the third iteration, going to the fourth by the end of this year, to just build a very robust product. But we're so lucky because we started this dream of building vaccine refrigerators here in Kenya. And we've been able to serve over 23 sites that are serving 50 plus communities in here in Kenya with vaccine, with oxytocin for women who are in labor. Our track record spans from providing vaccinations for children, COVID-19, ensuring that mothers actually do get a chance to have the baby at any time of the night or any day because there's oxytocin available and also the other available medical items such as blood. So what you see on this screen is a sites and rural communities in Kenya. Some that don't have electricity, some have electricity, some have technology that's just not appropriate, that have all adapted the use of VaxiBox, are piloting with us the various iterations that we've released into the market to just ensure that we grow, we build a robust product, but then also we create impact in the smallest way, but also eventually in a very grand way. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we also look at the food sector because we know food security is such a big issue that is facing still this community that we provide vaccines for. And we also know if they don't have electricity, then it means even the dairy farmer won't be able to store the extra milk overnight to sell it for higher prices at the market tomorrow. So because we know this community still exists in an ecosystem, and there's so many factors that still affect energy access, we ensure that we also try to bridge the cold chain gap within the food sector. And one of our products here is Koyo, that is a solar refrigerator that is ideal for food use. And we've given it to dairy farmers, to poultry farmers, to fish farmers, sorry, who eventually experience impact and growth in the revenues. And the whole point here is not just to grow the revenues of these farmers, but also to ensure that there is food available on the table for the neighbors or for the next community, because the excess that will have gone bad is actually been stored. This fridge is quite affordable. It costs 800 USD, from 800 USD, depending on the capacity of coil that actually a farmer needs. So we can even scale it up to much more modular systems, just to ensure that at the end of the day, we serve the needs of the farmers. And also we try to look at flexible ways for them to afford these refrigerators, because it's still a fact that cold chain is still quite expensive within the Kenyan and the African market. Next slide, please. Now, from the work that we've done, piloting Vaxibox within the healthcare communities and also delivering Koyo in the food market in Kenya, what we've learned, or rather best practices that we see here, is that efficiency is key. The more efficient the technology is, the better it's going to serve the farmer. And also the better the food storage, or rather food security is, but also it means it guarantees this farmer that their money that they're putting out there purchasing this thing is actually worth it. And that's, to me, I feel like it's a moral way of doing business within the energy space. So we also see that we must integrate passive cooling technologies and energy storage. For us, we choose PCM as our energy storage because PCM is much more efficient, much more gives even a better guarantee. Like, for example, with the Vaxibox, WHO recommends that the fridge must be able to maintain the cold for 3 days. Worst case scenario, the battery spoils, the solar is not working. To maintain 3 days, energy storage such as PCM come in really, really handy. That must be integrated with this technology to ensure that even the impact still escalates beyond maybe a wear and repair that has wear that has occurred in this refrigerator. Another thing that we've learned is that monitoring and data analysis has to be part of the progress to be able to track the energy consumption, the performance of the refrigerator, and also the efficiency of the cooling system. Not just for us as the manufacturer or as the technology provider, but also for the end user. Eventually, payment could be on performance basis. So I think this would be a really, really important aspect to generate all this data so that we know even which technologies are superior in the market, and also how they performing, and does that performance actually equate the amount of money that people are actually paying for them. Another reason why cold chain is staggering within the African space is not even a lie, is the O&M aspect, because products fail, and if there isn't such a solid O&M structure, it means there is no clear path of ensuring repair and also maintenance for this. And that means two things to me. Either the end user was cheated out of the money that they paid, but also it's a risk. It's a risk to food security. It's also a risk to healthcare when the fridge is undergoing downtime and the vaccines will spoil at the lights. All right. So other issue that we've learned is that we have to create awareness to promote these products, but also promote collaboration and partnership. Next slide, please. Okay, I won't even go so much into the founding partners. We are a team of young people who are trying to do amazing things within the African space. We always tell people that we're trying to be the first African company to get WHO certification for locally manufactured product, but we don't do this alone, we do it with partners. Next slide, please. These are the partners who supported us and still continue to support us. And thank you so much, Deepak, and thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nora. And personally, I really liked the first slide that you presented, the facts with the cold chain challenges that we face both in the food and the health sector. And the kind of work that you do with the Vaxibox is quite noble and quite appreciated. And we are happy to have you as one of the valued members of ARE as well. Thanks a lot. Moving over to the next speaker without spending more time, Mr. Ayula Dominic from Coolbox. Ayula, please turn up your camera on, and the floor is all yours for 10 minutes. Please stick to the time, and because we need to liberate more time for question and answer later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deepak. Great pleasure to be here. Quite excited, and thanks a lot for giving us the opportunity to be able to showcase our work. So my name is Ala Dominic. I work for Coolworks. As one of the co-founders, and we pride ourselves over the fact that we want to make refrigeration affordable and accessible to everyone that needs it. That's our main goal, basically. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is a woman called, I'll make it really short because I really want to focus on the case studies, who our customers are, what we do differently. So this is Mama Ibadan. Mama Ibadan is one of the first customers we had. The first time I met Mama Ibadan, she told me that one of the best decisions she made in her life is actually getting a Cobalt solar freezer. She was like, she doesn't have to throw her food or her frozen food away in the nearby river again. She said she now makes more money as compared to before she got the Cobalt solar freezer. Next slide, please. In sub-Saharan Africa, as we all know, we have over 600 million people that lack access to refrigeration. And this is due to the fact that a large population lacks access to electricity. And as compared to Europe and America, where you have 100% penetration in refrigeration, you have only 17% penetration of refrigeration in sub-Saharan Africa. So that tells you that we have thousands and hundreds of thousands of Mama Ibadans in sub-Saharan Africa. Next slide, please. So using the force of the sun and water, which is very abundant in sub-Saharan Africa, Coolbox created a unique solution that would generate refrigeration for up to 4 days, whether or not you have power or whether or not you have sunlight. And I'm sure you're wondering, what solution is this exactly? Next slide. Yeah, next slide, please. So using the unique properties of water, you can go to the next slide. So using the unique properties of water and of course of the sun, which is extremely abundant in Africa, we created that solution that is able to generate refrigeration, whether or not you have sunlight or whether or not you have power for up to 4 days. And this we did by storing energy in the form of ice rather than just in batteries. Next slide. And of course, we have different customers with different cooling needs. Some customers, obviously, their priority is to cool drinks, and some customers, their priority is to cool frozen foods. It's for fresh foods. So therefore, it's not all customers that want to freeze, neither is it all customers that just want to refrigerate. And this brings us to the next phase of the innovation. Next, please. So rather than just focus on customers that want to cool, we thought about people in the aquaculture who wants to actually freeze. By so doing, we integrated what we call the lithium batteries that is actually removable or replaceable. So no matter what your cooling need, you are able to use a Coolbox solar freezer. So whether you want to cool, that is farmers on the farm that want to cool fresh fruits, if you want to freeze, if you want to make ice block for sales, this is what we've been able to do. And if you look at the batteries, they're actually replaceable, and depending on the capacity and depending on the cooling needs of the customer. Next slide, please. And the question is, what good is the technology if no one can afford it? So we went further to integrate in our solutions a pay-as-you-go technology that allows individuals, small businesses, to be able to pay for their refrigerators in small monthly or weekly installments, bringing down the cost of owning an off-grid solar refrigerator. So a small business owner can actually stay by the corner of his or our store by paying a token amount through his or our phone. You get a token. The token is entered on the refrigerator or on the freezer, and it works for the period of days for which you've paid for. Because our job is actually to create access to refrigeration and to ensure we avoid food spoilage across sub-Saharan Africa. Next slide, please. So who are we and what have we done so far? Over the last, I would say 3 years, Coolbox has actually sold over 3,800 products globally with a 400% growth in Nigeria. We've signed about 18 B2B across 18 countries, including Danone, Orange, Baobab, and a couple of other customers. We've empowered over 1,700 small business owners, and we see value with our product with small business owners. Small business owners would include small restaurants, would be small older farmers. 90% of Coolbox customers actually reported profitability and savings on operational costs. In fact, in Nigeria today, as we speak, we've saved over 252,000 kilograms of food produce, and 996 women have reported being able to pay their students' school fees thanks to our technology. Next slide, please. So this is the footprint of where we are currently across sub-Saharan Africa. As you can see, there's a huge focus around West Africa, where we have the produce products fully entrenched. Next slide, please. So, and in terms of GHG emissions, of course, is not only efficient, but today we've saved over 110,000 metric tons, and over 38,000 metric tons today in terms of GHG emissions. And in the next 3 years, we hope to save 110,000, which will be equivalent to 4 times what a country like Switzerland actually saved in 2021. Next slide, please. These are all our numerous partners across the globe. Yeah, next slide, please. So this is a case study of we're not only for food safety, but also for medicine safety. But of course, our focus is majorly on food safety. These were in the early days, shortly after COVID. We had to service Delta states in Nigeria, where we got an order for over 30 units to supply. The good thing about it is the fact that we, Delta State is basically has a lot of public centers, public health centers that are in riverine areas, had to reach riverine areas. And during the COVID, our refrigerator played a very important role in ensuring that people actually have access to refrigeration. Thank you. All right. So I think my time is running out. I'll just make it quickly to the next, to my last slide. Yeah. All right. So next slide. Let me just think I have a few minutes to round up. Can you go to the next slide? Next slide, please. Yeah. So this is all about the data we get from our units because they are IoT powered. We can actually get the temperature reading from all our systems on the field. The next slide, please. Yeah. Next slide, please. Next slide. All right. So yeah, so this, I would like to end the presentation with this. So again, we have one of our favorite pictures where we have, this picture is actually filled with emotions. We can see the woman with doubts in her face, wondering if truly they would be able to, the solar freezer would actually work. And then we can see Mama Ibadan seated. This was the first installation we had in Lagos, Nigeria. And today I'm happy to tell you in this market, we have over 200 units of our freezers in this particular market. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ayula, for presenting this very innovative, let's say, cooling solution. I was pretty curious with the token system that you have implemented. Would be also curious to learn more about them and how they work in terms of the implementation perspective after the webinar, maybe when we have an exchange. Then I have the pleasure to invite the next speaker on screen. We have Dr. Ana Salvatierra Rojas. Once again, sorry for the bad pronunciation, but the floor is all yours. 10 minutes you got. Please stick to the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deepak, for the introduction. Dear audience, welcome to my presentation. I'm presenting the company Solar Cooling Engineering under the brand Self-Chill. Actually, when I saw the picture to use to promote this webinar, I was very motivated to present, as I was the one who took this picture in one of our initial projects in Kenya. The field work was really an eye-opener in terms of collaborative work and technological implementation for our company. But please let me tell you more about it in the following slides. Next, please. Our journey in the productive use of solar cooling started in 2013 through a project promoted by the GIZ in Tunisia and the University of Hohenheim, targeting improving the milk value chain for small producers. Our technology can be observed in the schematic figure of the top right of the monitor. The technology is conformed by a DC freezer and connected to a PV system to produce ice blocks that later on were used to cool down the milk using an ice compartment in insulated milk cans. So in this case, what we were doing, it was using this technology to transport from the farm to the cooperative. And as you can see on the figure on the bottom, when we compare cold milk and uncold milk, we proved that the quality of the product was preserved. Later on, we have a collaboration with the company Faisan, who promote the technology under the Kit Boss, Kit Milk Way, where the system can be adopted nowadays, but still the cost is an issue for small farmers. Next, please. Then we moved the same concept to Kenya, where we involve end users and install the system at the cooperative, at the farm gate, and at the collection center. As you can see in this slide, we test different sizes, different volumes of milk, and we integrated the farmers into this process. They were, for example, the ones who came up with the solution of how to transport the milk. Like, for example, in Tunisia, the milk is being transported in trucks, while here the farmers were the ones who were transporting the milk. So they were the ones who designed the holders for the milk cans that were transported later on to the market. And under this project, we work also with the university under the Project PARI project, the GIZ, and the Power and Agriculture. We can tell that after the project ended, unfortunately, there were some issues regarding to the maintenance of the technology. So this will bring us to the challenges that we face on this project. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, these challenges that we were facing, from one side, we have the negative effect that are usually done by donations, where we found milk tanks of more than 2,000 liters capacity in places where they just have 200 liters, 500 liters of production of milk. This was resulting in underutilization of the technology. And at the same time, this was lowering the willingness to pay for new technologies in those regions. A second challenge that we found was the maintenance of the technology, as there were not so many technicians, or the persons who do the installations were placed in remote areas, so it was very difficult to provide maintenance. Then the third aspect of that we faced in the challenges was the import of the technology. In our case, as we were transporting the DC freezers from Germany, it was costing around 60% of the total cost of the technology. And this leads us to our fourth aspect of the challenges, that is the knowledge about the production and the value chain. Most cooling technologies are not fitting the markets in rural areas, resulting in underutilization of the technology. As there was a need to cover all these challenges, we got our solution that is a holistic approach. Next slide, please. Then we come up with the self-chill approach. The CHIP is a brand of modular cooling solutions that are engineered by the company Solar Cooling Engineering and are distributed by the company Phesen. Next slide, please. Our core components is the self-cooling unit, self-chill cooling unit. Through the self-chill approach, our vision is to promote the usage of the usage of the technology. As you can see, here we have a secondary system that where we place the cooling units in this compartment, and in this compartment we are producing ice. Later on, when we are producing these ice, then water is being recirculated to different products that we are promoting through our technology. Next slide, please. As you can observe here, what is the idea of have this ice or this water chiller? So as you can see here, comparing with a conventional system, we can say that we place our PV panels connected to the system the conventional solar cooling system in the left side show us that we have an AC heat pump that is connected to a PV system and is providing the coolness to our cold room. However, bigger batteries are needed. In our system, what we use, as you saw in the previous slide, in our water chiller is the one that is connected the self-cooling units to the PV system. And then this water is being recirculated in the cold room. So the difference that we have here is that we are using a smaller battery compared to conventional system, and at the same time as we are storing our energy not only in an electrical way but also in a thermal way. Next slide, please. So based on that, we have different systems. As you can see here, we can, with the self-chill cooling units, we can develop different technologies like cold rooms, milk tanks, ice maker, battery cooling, and at the same time an air conditioning. With that, we have the idea of promoting the solar energy for different refrigeration approaches and targeting 3 values. One is the focus on agricultural value chain, and at the same time on the environmental protection and the sustainability through local value added. As the idea that we have is to just export the cooling units, and the rest of the components are mostly obtained locally. Next slide, please. Here, I want to explain a little bit from our main product that are cold rooms and milk tanks. I will be giving you some examples. We also have promoted ice maker, air conditioning, and battery cooling, but in this time, I will be presenting you in these 2 examples. Next slide, please. So coming to the self-chill cold room. With the self-chill cold room installed in Kenya, it was installed at a farmer gate, where the farmer export different herbs and was having a bigger losses, facing a rejection of the product at the port. Then we work together in a project, and we provide our modular solar cold room solution. After the cold room was installed, then the system, the farmer has greenhouses where he was harvesting every 10 or 14 days. Then after the system was being used, then there were days that the system was not utilized. Therefore, this farmer was renting the system to other farmers in order to preserve also the quality of other products. Then this led us to a very good understanding on that after using the cold room, the farmer was facing 0 rejection at the port. And this was also helping us to understand that as soon as we harvest the product, we really need to cool down in order to preserve the quality. And with that, we were reducing the losses significantly. Then, next slide, please. Then in this case of the milk tank in Kenya, we also have, depending on the seasonality, we can have higher production of lower production, but this gives us more flexibility to the utilization of the technology. As you can see here, depending on that, when there is also no product, then the farmers were using this alternatively to cool down other products. In that way, they were making a continuous use of the technology. Next slide, please. Here you can see that the impact of our technology, we deploy more than 200 cooling units around the world, targeting 12 countries in America and in Africa. Next slide, please. And at the same time, as part of our approach is the training. We did training of more than 400 people on-site and online. Next slide, please. And with this slide, I want to end my presentation, and you can visit our different projects, products, and services. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anna, for your kind intervention. And yeah, particularly what kept my attention was the metrics that you presented about the challenges. And I think that was a very impactful metrics, highlighting the four important aspects of what are the problems or what could be the problems. And like you mentioned, the donations negatively impacted the willingness to pay from the consumer side. That's actually one of the grave problems. However, it doesn't sound that important, but quite a thing if we see it at a in a long run perspective, if we want to make the project scalable. Thanks a lot for your intervention, and we would go to the next speaker with this, and that would be Mr. Emmanuel Bu from On Capital. And here we try to bring you the perspective of a financier supporting the cooling solutions of the different companies and of the different entities. Emmanuel, the floor is all yours. You've got 10 minutes, and yeah, please.
Can you hear me well?
There are some disturbances with your audio though. Can you speak more?
Yes. Can you hear me okay now? Is it any better?
No, there's a lot of disturbances in your audio actually. Can you mute yourself and then unmute again? Once.
Can you hear me better now?
Actually, no. Well, we do hear you, but it comes with a lot of disturbance. But if you're using any audio device, if you're using any headphones.
Yes. Let me.
No.
Sure.
Are you using any audio device? Yeah, that's better now. Yes, please.
All right, great, thanks. So to go very fast, thanks everyone, and nice to be with you. Jumbo to all of our friends and colleagues in Nairobi. Very briefly, I'm previously the co-founder of Energy Access Ventures, which is one of the first funds dedicated to access to energy in Africa. And I've set up about less than 2 years ago On Capital, which is dedicated to doing advisory, fundraising, and investments, not only in Africa, but really worldwide in vulnerable geographies. And so we work as well a lot in fragile countries. So going to the next slide, I'll talk about maybe our portfolio. So previously with EAV, we did 15 investments. I'll talk about some of them. One of them was Inspira Farms, which is also a CLASP partner because they won an award about 2 years ago, I believe. And we have now invested in 8, soon to be 16 companies. So we invest in the field of smart infrastructure and also responsible commodities. So of course, cold storage, energy access are a core part of our investment thesis. So going to the next slide, please. I'll talk about 2 examples of investments we've done. We're currently raising a new fund, which is going to be closed sometime next year, and we'll be looking at doing 1 significant investment in the cooling or cold storage space. So we look at all the value chain. Here are 2 examples of investments we've done with Energy Access Ventures, invested in 2016. So Inspira Farms does modular cold rooms that can be financed, remotely managed, and solar powered. They've had a good go-to-market initially in East Africa. And maybe what I wanted to talk about is more the learnings. I think from an investor perspective, we do look at the exit opportunities. What are the assets that are being built and that can be exited later on? And I think it was critical for us to look at, in the cold storage, what could be the assets that could later on position Inspira Farms as a potential acquisition. So the acquisition question is of course critical to all equity investors, maybe less so for the debt lenders. And truth is, some companies will require a bit of equity, but most of the financing that's required is usually debt or asset finance, so that your clients or people in need of cold storage can actually afford and repay over time. So Inspira Farm has been a great learning experience for myself as well as an investor. We've tried really different market segments. The company worked in the milk sector and actually pulled back for many reasons. It was a challenging value chain to scale in. We've seen similar challenges in India for companies like Promethean Power, and it's true that there's still a lot of grant funding that's not necessarily always well applied, and perhaps some grant funding could be better utilized to make the cost of asset financing more concessional, rather than having on one end very expensive interest rates for people trying to get their assets financed for clients versus pure grants that come in. For the health sector, truth is, from my own 15 years experience starting in Senegal, doing cold storage myself in rural Senegal, for health centers without subsidies, it's pretty difficult to see how those solutions can be really deployed at scale on time. And the pandemic has shown that subsidized schemes are still very useful and do benefit the greater good, let's say the public overall. And that's a topic I'll touch on maybe on the next slide. On the next slide here, we're not talking about B2B solutions like Inspira Farms, but rather, let's say small B2B or B2C, and it's really more the small refrigerators. So I invested in PEG Africa. I was also the first investor to actually propose a term sheet to B-Box 10 years ago. And so these companies in the pay-as-you-go space, be it PEG or B-Box and quite a few others, have diversified from lighting and phone charging or TV powering solutions to fridges typically, or small freezers. So it's an add-on. And here again, the question is, when we looked at the equipment providers, it was pretty hard to make a view on which equipment providers would be divestable for an equity investor. So definitely there's a lot of appetite for those appliances, energy efficiency, financeability, remote control are key aspects of those equipments. And we believe that those connected devices are a big add-on to create value for customers. They can have increased revenues, they can have improved diets as well, etc., all across the continent and all across the emerged economies or emerging economies. So the question again is, how can we invest best with equity? Is it in the equipment manufacturing or the customer acquisition or both? And it's still an open debate. So maybe for the next few minutes, I'll just lay out a few questions rather than showing more slides. The first few questions are really, even for my other partners on this webinar presenting, where do they feel the needs are in terms of funding? Is it equity? Is it debt or asset finance? And then where do they think that the best mix in terms of business model approach can emerge? Because historically in the US, in Europe, there's been large schemes to promote energy efficient appliances to households with VAT exemptions or financing incentives, financial incentives. And same for health centers. There's been really a push for the state or insurance companies or hospital organizations to promote those devices, get the data, and collect the revenues elsewhere than just trying to pay for the devices cash on a case-by-case basis. So I'll leave it there, and thank you again, DRE and GIZ, for organizing this great webinar.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. And I think that's very unique and quite nice to bring on board a financier to see the perspective of how they are thinking in the perspective of the cooling solutions and how they are thinking of supporting them. And also thank you for opening up with the questions, which are quite beneficial for our other contributors of this webinar to think, and then potentially also to engage with you and other fellow financiers to go forward and scale up their solutions. So thanks a lot for your intervention, Emmanuel. Yeah, one thing that also stood out for me potentially was the exit strategy that you mentioned about any financier. In order to have confidence before investing, they should think about, or they are thinking about how they are going to exit. And then I think that was one of the very important points that you raised. Thanks a lot for that. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, may I ask you to kindly turn all your cameras on, because we are going into the moderated panel discussion. I see that we have about 20 minutes time liberated for this exercise, and dear audience, you are more than invited to ask your questions. Please make sure that you are naming the person or the speaker that you're asking your question to. So let me see. Okan, can you kindly send me some questions which were sent? Okay, there is a question, which is a general question for all the speakers, and then maybe the best strategy is to take 1-line or 2-line answers from all of you. So the question goes like, how do you make sure your cooling solution is affordable for local smallholder farmers? Maybe we can start with Ruth very quickly.
So one of the programs we are implementing is a productive use financing facility that basically extends procurement subsidies for companies distributing these kind of solutions for farmers, and through that process enable them to take advantages of economies of scale to increase affordability. So that's one of the ways in which we intervene. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Nora?
Thanks for that. So we are currently piloting cooling as a service to try and see what is the most affordable that someone can actually pay for cooling. And I look forward to knowing really also myself, considering some other financing model hasn't really worked for us. And also just trying to create a very good balance on the best technology in the market and the price that is paid for, because I still feel like if that's stagger the payment as long as it can, but also the technology gives the best service as long as it can. And we find not really communicating that to the farmers or the end users, it's still pretty fair. So, yeah.
Thank you. Ayula?
Thanks. So basically, we've taken the first step by integrating the pay-as-you-go technology in the refrigerator. So our farmers can pay as low as $10 to $15 a month on a lease to own refrigerator. The second step we're taking is we're building a facility of about 70,000 capacity assembly plant. This would reduce the cost by close to 15%, because then we'll be having exemptions on tax in some of the countries in which we work with. So that's the ways we're looking at ensuring that all farmers will be able to get the product.
Okay, Anna?
Well, from my side, and from the experience that we gained through the years of implementation of our technology, we can say that we are in this way of reducing the cost always by just importing key components from our side, but at the same time, from the side of the users, we are trying to create more demand by creating awareness, making workshops, making trainings, making available technicians locally that are also helping to reduce these costs at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. Emmanuel, well, you're not doing directly the systems, but from the case study that you presented, the Inspira Farm one, are you aware of how they managed to make their systems affordable for their stakeholders?
Yeah, definitely. Indirectly, we do look at how companies can finance those assets and make it as cheap as possible. So working on the business model, working on syndicating, you know, concessional money, and so advocating for, of course, initiatives like CLASPs, you know, as an investor, making sure we have a blended finance approach with different stakeholders in the market, and then of course helping companies like Ayula's or Nora's or Anna scale, industrialize, and achieve economies of scale. So the cost of hardware, the cost of financing, the cost of going to market. If we can help them in any way we can, well, we make sure we'll actually achieve a return. I won't say that we want to make our own money the cheapest, because we want to show good returns for investors coming in a very risky but promising industry.
Right. Yeah, I think that's one of the very important aspects of being an investor, because that's how we, well, for sure, build confidence, and then the private sector companies can scale up. Thank you so much. There's another question regarding if the webinar is available, the recording and the presentation. Well, dear audience, as explained in the beginning, yes, the recording, the summary, as well as the PowerPoint presentation of this webinar will be made available on ARE and GB website. So please refrain from asking these questions and rather focus your questions to the subject, to the content. Okay, I see a question for drop access. Nora, is the price for the Koyo fridge including the 15-hour battery?
Yes, actually it includes the 15-hour battery. From 800 USD, you get 102-liter capacity refrigerator, and the 15.
Okay, a follow-up question to you as well. What is your view on whether it is best to offer individual fridges or freezers to individual farmers, or to offer walk-in cold rooms which act for more whole, like as a whole community?
I think both of these actually do work depending on the circumstance. So what we've done to the market is that there's one part of where users actually want to have ownership of their own refrigerators, or rather cold chain. So it's better than if they just get the individual cold chain. It's much more expensive, but then in the long term, when they complete paying for it, should they complete paying for it, I think it's easier to manage it. And I think for an organization, it could be cheaper for the organization because you don't get to spend so much money doing R&D for the extended period of time. But then the much more utility model, cold rooms and so forth, is great when you're trying to reduce the cost of cooling as much as possible, and also own the assets and find other ways of commercializing that model to make more money or more revenues for the organization. Then also it depends also on what's going to be stored. I can't really pick either one of them. I would initially, but now knowing the market better, one has to be like a market assessment to find out what would be most appropriate, a utility model or an individual cold chain.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. A question is there for Ayula. PayGo increases the cost of product overall. How are you managing default, and what do you do if a customer defaults?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. Yeah, it does increase the cost overall, but we can't deny the fact that it reduces the barrier to owning a refrigerator, and that's where we're actually going to. There's a cost of fund. We as well, we have to get the funds from partners to be able to get the refrigerated market. But however, one thing we've done very well is to reduce the barrier to allow a number of people have access to it. So that's a sacrifice that has to be made. In terms of repossession, when we have customers, which rarely happens, when we have customers that do not pay, it's often due to the fact that they are incapacitated, which means their families, they lost their businesses. But from indication, it's actually very rare because one, they deal with perishables, which is fish, meats, vegetables, which if there's no refrigeration could go bad. So they're actually the ones calling to make the payments, and that's their own source of income generation. So in actual fact, it's usually very low. The repayment is usually high, and the default rate is extremely low. But if it ever happens, then we give first month warning, second month warning, and by the third month, we pick up we're forced to repossess and get to a customer that will be willing to pay for the unit.
Yeah, I think that's I would say a very fair practice. Since you're speaking, do the prices of Coolbox vary per country?
Yeah, it does vary per country. In some countries, like in Kenya, we do have a few other countries as well, like in Ivory Coast, we have tax exemptions. So therefore, in such instances, obviously the cost will be lower. And in certain countries, we do not have those opportunity. And so therefore, the costs are high. So to answer your question, yes, the prices does vary from country to country.
Okay. Now there's a question which is posed to three speakers, Nora, Ayula, and Anna. I think this was also one of my questions, so it's nice that it comes from the audience directly. The question goes, how have you reached the financial break-even, and how do you currently fund your activities? Maybe I would call upon the name. Nora, you can go first, then Anna, then Ayula.
We haven't reached financial break-even. We haven't even scratched the surface. So with the healthcare product, the Waxbox is we are just getting out the thick of R&D. R&D is really, really expensive, and also going through certification process and what's it called? That's also still quite expensive. So it's we are probably going to reach break even with the Waxbox much quicker once we actually get we are in compliance, because it's very, very valuable. You've seen the market potential of it, and also the figures just show that we will actually get to break even much quicker. When it comes to the other refrigerator for food use, we still haven't reached financial. We haven't that break even point because we did a bit of R&D. Now we're just getting out of the thick of the R&D and product selection, and still we're a pretty young organization. We don't have like so many huge numbers even compared to oils. So we still have a bit of time to get there, but it's one product that is really financing us, because it turns out it's easier to sell a full fridge than a packed refrigerator, where the cost aspect actually makes it more sense. So the more shares that we actually have more sense for food refrigerators that actually drive the work that we do, that is really supporting us, but we still depend on patient capital to actually support our work.
Okay, thank you. Anna?
From our side, I can mention that we are mostly some projects are the ones who are helping us to test and prove different business model that we are applying. But at the same time, with the projections that we have, the break even can be reached after 3-4 years, and we are still on testing mode on see whether we are placing well our business model. As I was mentioning also in the presentation, there is a need to know which crops, what are their values, and as it was also mentioned from Ayola, this point of where the product, how expensive expensive it is in order to price in the terms of how you will be renting the system or how you will be placing that, is also a point of the end user that will be finding different ways how utilize the technology, because as long as the technology is being utilized, there is a chance to get this break even. However, when they, due to the seasonality, for example, there are low productivity, this could harm also these points. Therefore, there is a need to have this fast reaction. Okay, I cannot cool down tomatoes, then I will go into another crop that can be mangoes, for example, that are maybe next season. So having this variety of alternative based on knowledge that they are acquiring into the technology that they are using, then is very important in order to also enhance that. And we are sure we also try to potentiate that.
Right. Thank you. Ayula, what are your 2 cents on this? You unmute.
Yeah, thank you very much. So currently, just like Laura said, we're not, and Anna, we're not at break-even yet. We are hoping in the next 2 to 3 years. We're currently doing a lot of iterations, spending a lot on capital costs, setting up a local assembly to make the product more affordable, iterating on the product. At the moment, I would say we're not. And yeah, we don't think it's going to happen in the next 1 to 2 years. The priority for us is to iterate, grow as fast as we can across sub-Saharan Africa, so as to ensure that a lot of people have our units as soon as they can. And the second question on how we finance funding activities. So we recently closed the funding of around $2.5 million. And but I'm sure you would, with the cost of the units, you will agree with me that, and all we're currently doing an agreement that doesn't do so much. So we are currently fundraising again to be able to ensure that we get to these activities. So how we do it, we talk to investors, we talk to institutions, and yeah, and that's how we've been able to fund the company thus far.
Thank you. Well, I see like a wave of questions coming in, but being the moderator, I can also take the liberty of asking one question from my side, which has been pressing in my head, and that goes to Miss Ruth, who had the keynote address. Ruth, the presence of weak linkages or lack of conducive regulatory frameworks in the cooling spectrum leads to a very slow development. What can be done to address these kind of challenges?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So I think one of the possible interventions would be, like, there's really currently there's disjointed and disorganized, I guess, collaboration even among the the actors within the cooling space, and so it would be really good to have like collaborative, I don't know, forum or network, and this can leverage on existing like renewable energy associations, like have a working group that's like basically brings all these actors together. And so through that process, they are able to like, it allows for information sharing, which is needed. So like investment opportunities and things like that. And then as well, in terms of like how we, like proposals we would have or would want the government to intervene so they can be developed and presented as a unit. So I think that's potentially one way in which we could try and strengthen those ties and also just like the collaboration within the space.
Yeah, thank you. And that would be something also organizations like us, like ARE, can also intervene and bring the subjects to the different policymakers, highlighting the importance and the need of the hour when it comes to both the food and health sector and the usage of cold chains in it. Okay, then there is a question for Emmanuel, and that question is, yeah, Emmanuel, one of the need of financing by DRE enterprise is working capital financing and inventory financing. How are we addressing this need? can equity financing be used to leverage the working capital debt from the mainstream banks?
Good question. Let me start with the first part of the question. So ultimately, equity has to be used indeed to, in the early days, build the products, build the teams, build the first proofs of concept, of pilot. Sometimes you need to put a couple units out there so you can show to lenders that you'll have a cash flow that can match their repayment needs. So in the early days, there's very little to be done, perhaps apart from grants, but to use some equity to get stuff done. And think on the long run, of course, you want to minimize how much equity you raise, but rather try to sustain your operations and teams and costs from the debt, right? And honestly, I think we're now at the time where all of you guys, I think all companies can raise the minimum equity and push lenders to reduce their cost of finance, because you can't have everything. You can't have a solar powered sort of health clinic in a very poor and risky and fragile environment, repaying at 15%, 12%, or crazy IRRs. It's just stupid. What we should be looking at is long-term infrastructure financing. If we're doing rural electrification and fundamental positive social and environmental externalities, somebody's got to pay for it. And it should be, again, the same companies having to suffer and prove on every stance that they pay their tax, they go to the hardest places to reach, and they make a profit out of it. We can do it as an investor. I'm quite proud we've shown it, but it's utterly stupid. We've done it to show that, yes, it can be done and we can give the money back. So people can trust us with the work we're meant to be doing. But as investors, we should not be encouraging this stupid expectations. If you want to reduce carbon emissions from perishable goods, fine, pay for it. Okay. Same for you want to preserve your own health by making sure people don't get sick elsewhere in the world and you get the same disease a couple hours later because of the way the world is interconnected. Fine, pay for it. And I think the overall thing we need to look at is how we get insurances also in the mix for health, big time, because they need data. With data, we can de-risk. We can show that those people pay more for bad healthcare than anybody else because they don't get it on time. So I think there's a lot of externalities that are not factored in the mix, and the whole economic system needs to be rethought a little bit so that we have more clasps of this world. The Ruth should be managing like $1 billion to make sure that all over Africa there's subsidized lines to actually go and asset finance stuff. But of course, local banks can be mobilized. They're financing industrial cold rooms. So why can't they do the same for last mile cold rooms? Let's think of a system, for instance, where you finance on a pay-as-you-go basis hundreds of cold rooms across the country. You give a couple tenders to a few companies per district, and boom, they roll out their solutions for health clinics or for households or for more industrial or semi-industrial aggregation points. That can be done. And so why don't we do it? So we need to look for a big amount of money, not just drip-fed grants here and there. You need to write long reports to just show that you're having an impact. Of course, having cold juice during the month of Ramadan in certain places will cost more than anything else around town. So people can pay for it, but we need to help them lower the cost of the capex, and we need to help those companies lower their OPEX by reducing the cost of financing. So local banks are an option, but the money is expensive. And I think they're sort of lazy, if I can just tease any banker on the audience, because they've got piles of cash that they keep lending to the same people over and over again. Because why should they venture into something more risky when the risks in their geographies are already too much? And it's true. They're already facing too many uncertainties. Why should they go and do this when it should be infrastructure funds funded for by taxpayers or subsidized, cross-subsidized in a way? So I'll stop here. I think it's a call to action.
Yeah, thanks, Emmanuel, for bringing up the difficult subject on the discussion board, and also kind of in your words encouraging the bankers in our audience to consider venturing into the riskier areas and not just going on with the most safest form of investment in their geographies. And cooling can definitely, rural electrification as a broader scheme of things can definitely take place in that particular spectrum. Now, ladies and gentlemen, being mindful of the time, let me invite my colleague, Ms. Dorothea, to do the closing remarks. The remaining questions that we didn't manage to take, I will share them with all the speakers and with your email addresses, and they can reach out to you directly with the answers. So thanks a lot for listening in, and I hope you had a great informative session. With that, I would like to sign off and hand it over to my colleague, Dorothea. Thanks a lot. See you next time.
Yeah, thank you, Deepak Mahapatra, and thank you, Deepak, for your excellent moderation. Good afternoon to everyone. The time went by so fast, and the 9th event of the series paving the way for a clean energy transition, decentralized renewable energy, is coming to an end. The aim of the event series is to cover the broadest possibility, a range of topics related to off-grid energy access with decentralized renewable energy solution. So for this, it is important to illuminate many facets and an interdisciplinary approach is needed. So, but the most important part are the people, their well-being and their opportunities to participate in development. That is why I'm very happy about this today's topic, where we have focused on cooling in agriculture and health. On the one hand, the reduced food waste, therefore increase income, and on the other hand, to improve situations on health centers with the help of cooling facilities. So many thanks to our excellent panelists, Mrs. Ruth Kimani from Clean Energy Access, Mrs. Nora Magero from Drop Access, Mr. Ayola Dominic from Coolbox, Dr. Ana Salventiera Rojas from Self-Chill, and Emmanuel Bleu from Capital, for sharing your experience with us and for the insights you have given us. You covered many aspects which are playing very important roles for cooling facilities, for example, value chain, technologies, and financial issues. We really appreciate your inputs, and we are honored that you were here today. So your contribution provided us some additional ideas and possibility ways how we could improve our work related to cooling. Thank you also to the audience for joining us today and for your questions and suggestions. The large number of participants shows how important this topic is, and surely the discussion will continue in one way or another. So if you have any questions, please write to us, as Deepak mentioned already. So our next event will be in August after the summer break. And you can find the announcement on our websites as usual, on the website from ARE and also on the website from Green People's Energy. So a quick note before I finished, if you unfortunately missed a webinar of this series, don't worry, the summary, PowerPoints, and the recording are also published in chronological order on the website. So you can get all this information afterwards as well. Please get in touch with us from Green People's Energy to find out more about the initiative, and also contact the Alliance for Rural Electrification to find out how they can support you with a wide range of services. So now I come to the end. Thank you again for your participation. Have a nice rest of the day and a nice and relaxing summer holidays. So we are looking forward to seeing you at our next event in August. So yeah, have a nice day and thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.